I always thought betrayal would smell like cheap cologne and desperation. Turns out, it's more like Sauvignon Blanc and Chanel No. 5, served with a side of laughter that cuts deeper than any blade ever could. The kitchen of our Cambridge apartment buzzed with the familiar chaos of wine night. Mira had invited her usual crew: Sasha, the self-appointed queen bee with her perfectly sculpted eyebrows and razor-sharp tongue; Talia, whose gossip addiction rivaled her Instagram obsession; and Rhett, Sasha's boyfriend, who treated every conversation like a performance where he was the star. I'd been nursing the same beer for an hour, watching them tear our relationship apart like scavengers at a feast. The conversation had started innocently enough: wedding plans, guest lists, the usual pre-marriage chatter. But somewhere between the second bottle of wine and Talia's third story about her ex's financial failures, the tone shifted. "Honestly, Mira, I don't know how you do it," Sasha said, swirling her wine glass with practiced elegance. "Living with someone who's so content with mediocrity." Mira's laugh tinkled like broken glass. "Oh, Colby's sweet. He just lacks ambition, you know? Some people are climbers, others are, well, they're comfortable being stepped on." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, but a crystalline clarity that I hadn't experienced before. I set my beer down carefully, the condensation ring on the granite countertop perfectly round. "I mean, look at Arlen," Talia chimed in, and I caught the quick glance she shot toward Mira. "Now there's a man who knows what he wants and goes after it. His startup just got another round of funding, didn't it? Arlen Bishop." I knew the name, Mira's client, supposedly. Trust fund kid turned tech entrepreneur, the kind of guy who wore expensive sneakers to board meetings and called it disrupting dress codes. I'd met him once at a networking event where he'd looked through me like I was furniture. "Arlen's different," Mira said, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before, a warmth, an admiration that she'd never directed toward me. "He sees opportunities everywhere. He's not afraid to take risks." Rhett leaned back in his chair, gesturing with his wine glass. "That's the thing about successful people. They don't settle, they know their worth, and they demand it from the world. Unlike some people," Sasha added with a pointed look in my direction, "who just accept whatever scraps life throws at them." I stood up slowly, every movement deliberate. The conversation paused, 4 pairs of eyes turning toward me with varying degrees of amusement and disdain. "You know what?" I said, my voice steady. "You're absolutely right. Some people do settle for scraps." Mira's smirk widened. She looked beautiful in that moment. Predatory, but beautiful. Her auburn hair caught the light from our expensive pendant lamps, the ones I'd saved 3 months to buy because she'd fallen in love with them at West Elm. "Go on. Leave," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "One day you'll realize I'm the best thing you ever had." The group erupted in laughter, the sound echoing off our exposed brick walls like gunshots. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. "We'll see." Instead of leaving, I walked to the bedroom and closed the door. Their laughter continued in the kitchen, punctuated by Mira's voice regaling them with stories of my supposed inadequacies. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed, technically, since I'd bought it, and pulled out my phone. The first call was to the wedding planner. Cancellation policies, vendor contracts, deposit recovery. I took notes on everything. The second call was to my bank, requesting account statements and information about closing joint accounts. The third was to my lawyer, a guy named Pete who'd helped me with contract negotiations before. "Colby? It's pretty late for business calls," Pete said. "Emergency consultation. How quickly can I legally separate all financial ties from my fiancée?" A pause. "How quickly do you need it done?" "Before morning." "Jesus, okay, I'm listening." While I talked to Pete, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. screenshots of joint account balances, copies of the lease agreement, photos of receipts for everything I'd purchased for the apartment, the engagement ring receipt, the wedding venue contract with my signature as the primary financial guarantor. The laughter from the kitchen had died down, replaced by hushed conversation. I caught fragments through the thin walls, something about backup plans and maximizing the wedding hall. My fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, cataloging 3 years of shared finances. At 11:47 p.m., Mira's laptop chimed with a notification. She'd left it open on the dresser, and the screen lit up with a group chat message. I glanced at it without really meaning to, but once I saw the first line, I couldn't look away. Operation Wedding Cash Grab is a go. Mira's got the gift registry maxed and the backup guy lined up if this whole thing goes sideways. The message was from Sasha, and below it, a string of responses that made my stomach turn. Mira's reply: "Colby's so clueless. I could probably milk this for another 6 months if I wanted to." Talia: "Have you seen Arlen's new car? That matte black Mercedes is gorgeous. Way better than Colby's Honda." Mara: "Trust me, I've seen more than just his car." More laughter from the kitchen, but now it sounded different to my ears, sharper, more calculated. I took photos of the chat with my phone, then continued scrolling. Months of messages, planning sessions, discussions of my usefulness as a financial stepping stone. One message from 2 weeks ago stopped me cold. "Colby actually thinks I love him. It's almost sad, but his credit score is perfect and he's already agreed to co-sign for my business loan. Once that goes through, I can figure out my exit strategy." I closed the laptop gently and returned to my phone calls. Pete had already started the paperwork: emergency financial separation, asset protection, cancellation of joint obligations. My credit card company was surprisingly helpful at 1 a.m., immediately removing Mara as an authorized user and issuing me a new account number. The voices in the kitchen grew louder as the night wore on. I heard my name mentioned frequently, usually followed by laughter. Apparently, I was the evening's entertainment, the pathetic fiancé who didn't know his woman was already planning her upgrade. At 3:15 a.m., I heard the front door close as her friends finally left. Mara's heels clicked across the hardwood floor, pausing outside the bedroom door. "Colby? Are you asleep?" I didn't answer. She tried the handle, but I'd locked it, something I'd never done before in our 3 years together. "Colby, come on. Don't be dramatic. We were just having fun." Still nothing. After a few minutes, I heard her settle onto the couch, probably assuming I was having some kind of emotional breakdown that would resolve itself by morning. She was wrong. By sunrise, I'd canceled the wedding venue, the caterer, the photographer, and the florist. The deposits were non-refundable, but the future payments, my future payments, were voided. I'd closed our joint checking account and transferred my portion to a new account at a different bank. The joint savings account followed. Our shared credit card was canceled, and I'd removed myself from the apartment lease after confirming that Mira's income alone wouldn't qualify her for renewal. The engagement ring, purchased with my money and legally my property until the marriage was finalized, went into a safety deposit box along with copies of all the documentation I'd gathered. At 7 a.m., I unlocked the bedroom door and walked to the kitchen. Mira was still asleep on the couch, her makeup smeared and her perfect hair a tangled mess. I made coffee quietly, then sat at the kitchen island with my laptop and phone, fielding calls from confused vendors and confirming cancellations. She woke up at 8:30, stretching and groaning about her neck. "God, this couch is awful. Why didn't you just unlock the door?" She padded to the coffee maker, still in last night's dress. "I need to shower and get ready. I'm meeting Arlen at 10 to discuss the new campaign strategy." I looked up from my laptop. "No, you're not." She paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips. "What? You're not meeting Arlen. You're not doing anything involving my money, my credit, or my apartment. You're moving out." The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile floor. Coffee splashed across her bare feet, and she jumped back with a yelp. What are you talking about? Colby, if this is about last night, this is about everything. I closed the laptop and stood up. The wedding's canceled. The joint accounts are closed. Your name is off the lease, effective immediately. You have until noon to pack your personal belongings. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally, a kind of desperate calculation. You can't do this. We're engaged. We have contracts, obligations. Had, past tense. I walked to the counter and picked up a manila folder. These are copies of everything I filed last night. Cancellation notices, account closures, lease modifications. It's all legal and documented. She grabbed the folder, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. People don't just, you can't just what? Leave? Isn't that what you told me to do last night? The color drained from her face. We were just talking. It didn't mean anything. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos of the group chat. This meant something. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You went through my computer. You left it open. I saw one message and photographed the rest. 3 months of planning, Mara. 3 months of laughing about how stupid I was, how easy I was to manipulate, how you were just using me as a stepping stone to something better. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. Real tears, not the practiced ones she used when she wanted something. Colby, please. I never meant for you to see that. It was just girl talk. You know how Sasha gets everyone worked up. Girl talk about your backup guy? About milking me for wedding gifts? About my credit score being your ticket to a business loan? She reached for me, but I stepped back. The distance between us felt like a canyon. I love you, she said, the words coming out in a rush. I know it doesn't look like it, but I do. All that other stuff. It's just fantasy. It doesn't mean anything. Your card was declined at dinner last night, wasn't it? She nodded miserably. That wasn't fantasy. That was me, removing you from my financial life while you were laughing about how clueless I was. I picked up my keys and wallet. I'm going to work. When I come back at noon, I expect you to be gone. Leave the key on the counter. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Mira? You were wrong about one thing. I'm not going to crawl back. I'm not going to realize you were the best thing I ever had. Because the best thing I ever had was the self-respect I'm getting back today. The door closed behind me with a soft click, cutting off the sound of her sobs. I stood in the hallway for a moment, waiting for the guilt or regret to hit me. It never came. The elevator descended 23 floors while I mentally cataloged everything that needed to happen next. My phone buzzed constantly. Wedding vendors calling for confirmation, Mira texting increasingly frantic messages, and one missed call from my mother, who somehow already knew something was wrong. I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. My Honda Civic sat in the parking garage like a faithful dog, reliable and unpretentious. Mara had always been embarrassed by it, especially after she started consulting for Arlen and his matte black Mercedes. Now it felt like freedom on 4 wheels. The drive to my office gave me time to think. I ran a small software consulting business, nothing glamorous, but profitable enough to afford the lifestyle Mara had grown accustomed to. My specialty was fixing other people's technical disasters, which had taught me the value of systematic problem-solving and documentation. This situation was just another problem to solve. My office occupied the corner of a converted warehouse in Somerville, shared with 3 other small businesses. The rent was cheap, the coffee was strong, and nobody cared if I worked until 3 a.m. when a project demanded it. I'd been considering upgrading to something more impressive, but now I was grateful for the low overhead. Ty Martinez was waiting in the lobby when I arrived, slouched in one of the mismatched chairs with a coffee and a newspaper. We'd grown up in the same neighborhood, taken different paths through our 20s. his involving a brief stint in county lockup for some youthful stupidity, but reconnected when he started driving delivery trucks for one of my clients. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said without looking up from the sports section. "Worse, someone tried to steal my entire future." That got his attention. Ty folded the paper and studied my face. He had the kind of street instincts that came from growing up hard, and right now those instincts were telling him something significant had shifted in my world. "Want to talk about it?" I gave him the abbreviated version while we walked to my office. Ty listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So, what's the plan?" "First, I secure everything she might try to touch. Then I make sure she can't damage my business or reputation. After that," I shrugged, "we see what moves she makes. And if she tries to get nasty?" I powered up my computer and pulled up the photos of the group chat. She already got nasty. She just didn't know I was watching. The morning flew by in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I contacted every client, vendor, and business partner to inform them of my change in relationship status and to update my emergency contact information. Professional but thorough, I wanted no surprises if Mira decided to play games with my livelihood. The most important call was to Dataflow Industries, a mid-sized company that had been courting me for months to handle their system migration. The contract was worth more than I usually made in 6 months, but I'd been hesitant to commit because it would require long hours and travel, things that Mira had made clear would interfere with wedding planning. "Colby, perfect timing," said Janet Morrison, Dataflow's CTO. "I was just about to call you. We need to move faster on this project. Are you available to start next week?" "Completely available. And Janet, I'm prepared to offer you a 15% discount if we can fast-track the timeline." "15%? What's the catch?" "No catch. My schedule just opened up significantly." By lunch, I'd signed 3 new contracts and renegotiated terms on 2 existing projects. The income boost was substantial, enough to replace everything I'd been splitting with Mara and then some. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Mara and 43 text messages. I scrolled through them without opening the individual threads, watching the tone evolve from confusion to anger to desperation to threats. The threats were interesting. She was going to expose me to my clients as unstable and controlling. She was going to tell everyone I'd financially abused her. She was going to make sure I never worked in Boston again. I forwarded the screenshots to Pete, my lawyer, along with a brief note. "Potential defamation issues. Please advise on protective measures." His response came back within minutes. "Holy hell, Colby. This woman is either desperate or delusional. I'm drafting a cease and desist letter now. Do not engage with her directly." At 12:30, I drove back to the apartment. The key was on the counter as requested, but Mira was still there, sitting at the kitchen island with red eyes and a suitcase by the door. "I need more time," she said without looking up. "I don't have anywhere to go." "You have friends? You have family? You have Arlen?" She flinched at the name. "That's not... It's complicated." "It's really not." I walked past her to the bedroom and began checking drawers and closets. She'd taken her clothes and personal items, but left behind anything I'd purchased: jewelry, electronics, even the expensive skincare products she'd claimed were necessities. "Colby, please, can we just talk about this like adults?" I emerged from the bedroom with a small box, her spare phone chargers, a few books, some makeup items she'd missed. Adults don't plan to scam their partners out of wedding gifts. Adults don't use people for their credit scores. Adults don't laugh about manipulating someone they claim to love. She stood up, swaying slightly. "I made mistakes. I know that. But throwing away 3 years over some stupid messages... I'm not throwing away 3 years. I'm recovering from them." My phone rang. The caller ID showed Dataflow Industries. "I need to take this." "Colby, it's Janet. We've got a problem. Someone called our main line claiming to be your business partner, saying you were having personal issues that might affect the project timeline. They suggested we might want to reconsider working with you. I looked at Mira, who had gone very still. What exactly did this person say? They claimed you were going through a messy breakup and might not be emotionally stable enough to handle a major project. They also implied there might be some kind of financial irregularities in your business practices. Janet, I'm going to email you some documentation right now. Can you stay on the line for 5 minutes? Of course. I pulled up my laptop and quickly assembled a package. Business licenses, client testimonials, financial statements, and the screenshots of Mira's group chat messages. I attached them to an email with a brief explanation of the situation. Check your email, I told Janet. A pause while she reviewed the documents. Jesus, Colby, someone really tried to sabotage you. This is... Wow. These messages are pretty damning. The person who called you is my ex-fiancée. As you can see from the screenshots, she's been planning to use me financially and had every intention of ending our relationship once she got what she wanted. I discovered this last night and ended the engagement immediately. I'm so sorry. This must be incredibly difficult. It's clarifying, actually. Janet, I want to revise our contract terms. Instead of the 15% discount I offered this morning, I'd like to propose a 20% increase in my rate, with a performance bonus structure. This project is now my top priority, and I can guarantee you'll have my complete focus. Another pause. Given what I'm seeing here, I think that's more than fair. You're clearly dealing with someone who's trying to damage your reputation out of spite. We'll update the contract and send it over this afternoon. I hung up and looked at Mira, who was staring at me with something approaching horror. You called my client? I was trying to protect you. I thought if you lost that contract, you'd realize how much you need me. Protect me. I repeated the words slowly, tasting their absurdity. You tried to destroy my business relationship to protect me. I panicked, okay? I woke up this morning and my entire life was gone. Everything I thought was solid just disappeared. I wasn't thinking clearly. Your entire life was built on lies. What disappeared was the illusion that you could keep lying indefinitely. I walked to the door and held it open. You need to leave now. She picked up her suitcase, then paused in the doorway. This isn't over, Colby. I know things about you, about your business. I can make your life very difficult. You already tried. It backfired. What makes you think the next attempt will go better? She left without answering, her heels clicking down the hallway toward the elevator. I watched until the doors closed, then returned to the apartment and changed the locks. The locksmith was expensive but thorough. New deadbolts, new door handles, new security chain. While he worked, I called my mother. Colby, honey, what's going on? Mira called me this morning crying about some kind of misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. I canceled the wedding. A long pause. What happened? I gave her a condensed version, focusing on the financial deception rather than the emotional betrayal. My mother was practical above all else. She'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 12, and she had no patience for people who tried to use others. Good, she said when I finished. I never liked her anyway. You never said anything? It wasn't my place, but she always struck me as someone who was more interested in what you could do for her than who you were as a person. I'm proud of you for figuring it out before you signed those marriage papers. That evening, I sat in my newly secured apartment with a beer and my laptop, reviewing the day's work. 3 new contracts signed, 1 major project expanded, and a woman who'd planned to use me as a stepping stone removed from my life. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you're so smart, but this isn't over. You're going to regret this. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Pete, then blocked the number. Another buzz. Different unknown number, same message. She was using her friends' phones now. I poured myself another beer and opened a new document on my laptop. If Mira wanted to play games, I needed to be prepared. Documentation, evidence, legal protections, all the tools I use to solve technical problems could be applied to this situation. The difference was that fixing a broken system was usually straightforward. People, on the other hand, could be endlessly creative in their capacity for self-destruction. I was about to find out just how creative Mira could be. The next morning brought a voicemail from my mother that made me smile despite everything. "Colby, dear, I forgot to mention, that girl Mira called me back yesterday evening crying about financial abuse and asking if I could talk sense into you. I told her the only abuse I could see was her abusing your trust and your wallet. She hung up on me. I like her even less now." My mother had never been one to mince words. I was reviewing contract specifications over coffee when my phone rang. Pete, my lawyer, sounded more awake than anyone had a right to at 7 a.m. "We've got developments," he said. "Your ex-fiancée filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau claiming you've been operating fraudulent business practices. She also contacted the Massachusetts Attorney General's office with allegations of financial abuse." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "How serious is this?" "Not very, given the documentation you provided. Both complaints are clearly retaliatory and lack any supporting evidence. But she's not done. I've got reports that she's been calling your business contacts, claiming to be your business partner, and spreading rumors about your stability. She tried that yesterday with data flow. It backfired." "Good. But Colby, this woman is escalating. I think it's time we went on the offense." An hour later, I was sitting in Pete's office reviewing a comprehensive legal strategy: cease and desist letters, defamation documentation, and a formal complaint about Mira's harassment campaign. Everything properly filed, legally sound, and designed to create consequences for her actions. "The beautiful thing about people like this," Pete explained, "is that they usually can't help themselves. They keep escalating until they cross a line that gets them into real trouble. Our job is to document everything and be ready when that happens." I spent the morning implementing Pete's advice, then drove to my office to focus on actual work. The data flow project was complex enough to require my full attention, which was exactly what I needed, something challenging and productive to occupy my mind. Ty was waiting again, this time with coffee for both of us, and a grin that suggested he had news. "Your ex is making quite an impression around town," he said, handing me a cup. "My cousin Rosa works at that fancy salon on Newberry Street. You know, the one where all the Instagram girls go. Apparently, your Mara showed up yesterday demanding a full treatment package, then had a complete meltdown when her card got declined." "Public meltdown?" "Rosa said she started screaming about identity theft and financial abuse, claiming her fiancé had stolen her money, made such a scene that they had to ask her to leave. The whole thing got recorded by some other customers." I pulled out my phone and searched social media for Mara's name. It didn't take long to find the video. Shaky phone footage of her shouting at the salon staff while other customers watched in fascination. The caption read, "When keeping it bougie goes wrong. Salon drama, Bridezilla." The video had been shared dozens of times already, with comments ranging from amused to brutal. Someone had tagged Mara's professional social media accounts, which meant her business contacts were seeing this too. "There's more," Ty continued. "She tried to return a bunch of stuff to that expensive boutique downtown. Clothes, shoes, accessories, but everything was purchased on credit cards that are now canceled, so the returns got flagged as potentially fraudulent. She's unraveling. Fast, and publicly." Ty leaned back in his chair. "Question is, what do you want to do about it?" I thought about that while I worked through the morning. Mira was destroying her own reputation more effectively than I ever could, but she was also trying to drag me down with her. The smart play was to stay above the fray and let her self-destruct. But then my phone rang with a call that changed my perspective. "Colby, This is Marcus Chen from TechFlow Solutions. We met at the networking event last month. I remembered him. Young entrepreneur, ambitious, the kind of guy who collected business cards like poker chips. Hi, Marcus. What can I do for you? Actually, I'm calling to give you a heads up. Someone's been spreading some pretty nasty rumors about you in our professional circles. Claims about financial irregularities, personal instability, that sort of thing. Let me guess, a woman claiming to be my business partner? You know about this? It's my ex-fiancée. She's having trouble accepting that our relationship is over. I can send you documentation if you're interested in the full story. That would be helpful. But Colby, you should know. She's not just making random calls. She's being strategic about it, targeting your competitors, potential clients, people in positions to influence your reputation. This isn't just emotional lashing out. This is calculated. After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen for several minutes. Mayra wasn't just self-destructing. She was trying to take me with her, and she was smart enough to be methodical about it. Time to stop playing defense. I called Ty into my office and closed the door. How do you feel about doing some reconnaissance work? His grin was answer enough. Mira's been hanging out at that new rooftop bar downtown, Altitude. Very trendy, very expensive, exactly the kind of place she goes to be seen. I need to know who she's talking to, what she's planning, how coordinated this campaign against me really is. You want me to spy on your ex? I want you to be a guy having drinks at a popular bar who happens to overhear some interesting conversations. Ty's reconnaissance mission that evening was more successful than I'd hoped. He returned with photos, audio recordings, and a story that painted a clear picture of Mayra's strategy. She's not working alone, he reported. Sasha and Talia are helping her coordinate the calls to your business contacts. They've got a whole system, dividing up lists, sharing talking points, even practicing their stories to make sure they sound consistent. He showed me his phone, where he'd recorded portions of their conversation from a nearby table. Mayra's voice, slightly slurred from wine. The key is to sound concerned, not vindictive, like we're genuinely worried about his stability and want to protect people from making a mistake. Sasha, what about the financial abuse angle? Are we still pushing that? Only if they seem receptive. Some people don't buy it because I obviously lived well. But the mental health thing works better. Everyone's afraid of dealing with someone who might be unstable. Talia. Arlen says he can reach out to some of his contacts too. He knows people in the tech scene who might be willing to spread the word. My jaw tightened. So Arlen was involved too. The backup guy was helping to destroy my reputation while positioning himself as Mayra's rescuer. There's more, Ty said. They're planning something bigger for this weekend. Some kind of public confrontation designed to make you look bad. I couldn't get all the details, but it involves the tech networking event at the convention center. The Tech Boston Mixer. I'd been planning to attend, partly for business, and partly to show that I wasn't hiding from the rumors. Now it sounded like walking into an ambush. Did you get any of this on video? Better. Ty pulled out a small device I didn't recognize. Audio recorder. Got about 2 hours of their planning session, including the part where Mayra admits the whole financial abuse story is made up. I stared at the device. Ty, this is completely legal. Public place, no expectation of privacy, and they were talking loud enough for half the bar to hear. I checked with a lawyer friend before I went. You have a lawyer friend? I have all kinds of friends. The question is, what do we do with this? I spent the rest of the evening listening to the recordings and planning my response. Mayra and her allies had made a crucial mistake. They'd gotten overconfident and sloppy. Their conspiracy was now documented. Their lies were on record, and their planned ambush was no longer a surprise. More importantly, they'd given me everything I needed to turn their own strategy against them. The next morning, I began making calls of my own. But instead of spreading rumors or making accusations, I was offering something much more valuable, the truth, backed by evidence. Janet, it's Colby. I wanted to give you an update on the situation we discussed. It turns out my ex-fiancée has been conducting a coordinated campaign to damage my reputation, involving several accomplices and a planned public confrontation. I've got audio recordings of them planning their strategy, including admissions that their allegations are fabricated. Are you serious? Completely. I'm sending you the relevant excerpts now. I wanted you to be aware in case anyone else contacts Dataflow with stories about me. This is incredible. She's actually planning to ambush you at a professional event? This Saturday at the Tech Boston Mixer, but since I know about it now, I'm thinking of turning the tables. How? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. By giving them exactly what they want, a public confrontation, just not the kind they're expecting. By Friday afternoon, I'd contacted every business associate, client, and professional contact who might be at the mixer. I didn't spread gossip or make accusations. I simply shared the facts, supported by documentation and audio evidence. The response was overwhelmingly supportive, and several people offered to help if I needed it. Pete reviewed my plan and gave it his legal blessing. It's risky, he admitted, but if you pull it off, it'll end this campaign permanently. Just remember, stay calm, stick to the facts, and let them hang themselves with their own words. Saturday evening, I arrived at the convention center early and positioned myself strategically near the main networking area. Ty was there too, along with several of my clients and business contacts who'd volunteered to witness whatever was about to happen. At 8:30, Mira arrived with her entourage, Sasha, Talia, and Arlen, all dressed like they were attending a red carpet event rather than a professional mixer. They spotted me immediately and began moving in my direction with the coordinated precision of a military operation. Colby! Mira's voice carried across the room, drawing attention from nearby conversations. I'm so glad you're here. We need to talk. She approached with tears already forming in her eyes, a masterful performance of the concerned ex-fiancée worried about her former partner's well-being. I've been so worried about you, she continued, her voice pitched perfectly for the growing audience. The way you've been acting lately, the things you've been saying to people. I think you need help. Sasha stepped up beside her. We're all concerned, Colby. This isn't like you. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio recording app. You're absolutely right, Mira. This isn't like me. The old me would have let you get away with it. Get away with what? She looked genuinely confused, as if she'd forgotten that her planning session had been recorded. The coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation, the fabricated stories about financial abuse and mental instability, the systematic calls to my business contacts designed to cost me clients. Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been trying to protect people from what? From the truth? I raised my voice slightly, ensuring everyone in the vicinity could hear. Should I play the recording of you admitting the financial abuse story is made up? Or the part where you and your friends practice your lies to make sure they sound consistent? The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the drama. I recognized several faces, potential clients, competitors, industry colleagues. Exactly the audience Mira had wanted for her planned ambush. You recorded us? Sasha's voice cracked with indignation. I recorded you planning to destroy my reputation with fabricated stories, in a public place where you were speaking loud enough for half the bar to hear. I looked directly at Mira. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Arlen stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Look, everyone's emotions are running high here. Maybe we should take this somewhere private. Private? I laughed. Like the private group chat where you all plan to scam wedding gifts from our friends and family? Like the private conversations where Mara admitted she was just using me for my credit score? I pulled out my phone and began reading from the screenshots. Quote, Colby's so clueless. I could probably milk this for another 6 months if I wanted to. End quote. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Mira looked around desperately, realizing that her planned ambush had become her public execution. "That's taken out of context," she stammered. "You don't understand? Then let's provide some context." I opened the audio file and hit play. Mira's voice filled the space. "The key is to sound concerned, not vindictive, like we're genuinely worried about his stability and want to protect people from making a mistake." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Several people pulled out their phones, presumably to record what was happening. "Stop," Mira whispered. "Please, just stop." But I was just getting started. I played the excerpt where she admitted fabricating the financial abuse allegations, the part where they divided up my professional contacts to spread rumors, and finally, the segment where Arlen offered to help destroy my reputation. When the audio ended, the silence was deafening. "So," I said, addressing the crowd as much as Mira, "to summarize, my ex-fiancée and her friends planned to scam our wedding guests, use me for financial gain, and when I discovered their scheme, they launched a coordinated campaign to destroy my professional reputation with fabricated allegations." I turned back to Mira, who was now openly crying, real tears this time, not the practiced ones. "You wanted a public confrontation, Mira. You wanted to humiliate me in front of my peers and destroy my reputation. Congratulations, you got exactly what you wanted, just not the way you planned it." The crowd began to disperse, but not before several people approached me with business cards and expressions of support. One woman, a startup founder I'd been hoping to work with, shook my head and said, "That was the most professional handling of a personal attack I've ever witnessed. Call me Monday. I've got a project that's perfect for you." Mira and her friends retreated toward the exit, their grand plan in ruins. But as they reached the door, Mira turned back one final time. "This isn't over," she called out, her voice carrying across the room. I smiled and raised my phone. "Actually, it is, but please keep talking. I'm still recording." She left without another word, followed by her increasingly uncomfortable accomplices. Ty appeared at my elbow with 2 beers. "Well, that was entertaining. Think she learned her lesson?" I accepted the beer and took a long drink. People like Mira don't learn lessons. They just find new ways to blame everyone else for their problems. So what's next? I looked around the room at the networking event continuing around us, at the business cards in my pocket, at the opportunities that Mira's attempted sabotage had actually created. Next, we see how creative she can get with her revenge fantasies, because I'm just getting started. The weekend after the Tech Boston confrontation brought an unexpected quiet. No angry calls, no threatening texts, no mysterious complaints filed with regulatory agencies. It was the kind of silence that made me more nervous than Mira's previous escalations. "She's planning something," I told Ty over coffee Monday morning. "This isn't her giving up. This is her regrouping." Maybe she finally realized she was in over her head. I shook my head. "You didn't see her face when she left Saturday night. That wasn't defeat, that was calculation." I was right to be suspicious. The first sign came Tuesday morning when I arrived at my office to find a formal notice taped to my door, a complaint filed with the city's business licensing department alleging that I was operating without proper permits and engaging in fraudulent billing practices. Pete's response was swift and decisive. "This is harassment, plain and simple. We're filing for a restraining order and adding this to our defamation case. But Colby, she's not going to stop until she faces real consequences." What kind of consequences? The kind that cost her something she actually cares about. That afternoon, I got a call from Marcus Chen, the entrepreneur who'd warned me about Mira's rumor campaign. "Colby, I've got some interesting news. You know that startup accelerator program downtown, Innovate Boss? Your ex applied for their next cohort, and they've been doing background checks on all the candidates. And let's just say your documentation of her activities has been very educational for their screening committee. Apparently, ethical behavior is a key criterion for acceptance." I felt a smile tugging at my lips. That's unfortunate for her. It gets better. She listed Arlen Bishop as a reference and business mentor. But Arlen's company has been having some financial difficulties lately. Something about investors pulling out after some questionable social media activity. The pieces were starting to connect. Mira's grand plan to upgrade from me to Arlen was falling apart just as spectacularly as her attempt to destroy my reputation. But I wasn't content to let karma handle everything. If Mira wanted to play games with people's livelihoods, she needed to understand that actions have consequences. I spent the next few days conducting my own research. Mira's social media presence, her business connections, her client relationships, all of it was surprisingly fragile when examined closely. Her entire professional identity was built on perception and networking rather than actual results. The breakthrough came when Ty's cousin Rosa called with an update from the salon world. You remember that video of your ex having a meltdown when her card got declined? Well, it turns out she's been doing that at a lot of places around town. Restaurants, boutiques, even her gym. Word's gotten around that she's bad for business. How bad? Bad enough that several places have started requiring cash up front when she tries to book services. And get this, she's been telling people that her business partner stole her money and left her financially stranded. Business partner? That's what she's calling you now. Apparently, the fiancé story wasn't getting her enough sympathy, so she upgraded your relationship to make the betrayal sound worse. I had to admire the creativity, even as it infuriated me. Mira was rewriting history to cast herself as the victim of a business partnership gone wrong, rather than a romantic relationship that ended due to her deception. The problem with lies, though, is that they require constant maintenance. And Mira was about to discover that her version of events wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. I began reaching out to her professional network, not to spread gossip, but to clarify the actual nature of our relationship and provide documentation of her attempts to sabotage my business. The response was eye-opening. "I'm so glad you called," said Jennifer Walsh, a marketing consultant who'd worked with Mira on several campaigns. "She's been telling people that you two were business partners and that you stole client lists and proprietary information when you left. I was starting to wonder if I should be concerned about working with her. We were never business partners. We were engaged until I discovered she was planning to use me financially and had been cheating on me with one of her clients." Oh my God. She told me you were the one having an affair, and that's why she had to freeze the business accounts to protect herself. I sent Jennifer the screenshots and audio recordings, just as I'd done with dozens of other people over the past week. Each conversation revealed another layer of Mira's deception, another fabricated story designed to reframe her as the victim. But the most interesting call came from someone I'd never met, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran a consulting firm specializing in social media crisis management. "Mr. Hale, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. Mara Castellano contacted my firm last week, asking for help managing what she called a defamation campaign being waged against her by a former business partner." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd need to review all the relevant materials before taking on her case. She sent me screenshots of text messages, social media posts, and what she claimed were recordings of threatening phone calls. And it was immediately obvious that most of the materials had been fabricated or taken out of context. The metadata on the screenshots showed they'd been edited, and the audio recordings contained obvious splices. When I pointed this out, she became hostile and accused me of being part of the conspiracy against her. I leaned back in my chair, impressed despite myself. She tried to hire a crisis management firm to help her fabricate evidence of harassment. Essentially, yes. But here's the thing. She also provided me with what she claimed were examples of the false allegations you were spreading about her. Except those turned out to be completely accurate, supported by documentation that she inadvertently included in her materials. You mean she proved my case while trying to disprove it? Exactly. Mr. Hale, I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've never seen someone self-sabotage this thoroughly. She's not just burning bridges, she's napalming the entire landscape. That evening, I met Ty at our usual bar to discuss strategy. The place was crowded with the after-work crowd, providing perfect cover for our conversation. "So, what's the endgame here?" Ty asked. "She's already destroyed her own credibility and tanked her business prospects. How much more damage can she do to herself?" "The question isn't how much more damage she can do to herself," I replied. "It's how much more damage she's going to try to do to me before she's done." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. I've got lawyers now, and they're very interested in your harassment campaign." I showed the message to Ty, who snorted with laughter. "Lawyers? What's she going to sue you for, telling the truth?" "Probably. People like Mara always think the legal system exists to protect them from the consequences of their actions." But the mention of lawyers concerned me enough to call Pete that evening. "She's bluffing," he said after I read him the text. "I've been monitoring the court filings, and there's nothing from her or anyone representing her. Besides, what's she going to claim? That you defamed her by playing recordings of her actual words? What if she's not bluffing? Then we countersue for harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with business relationships. Colby, you've got a paper trail that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. If she wants to escalate this to court, she's going to lose badly." The next morning brought vindication in an unexpected form. I was reviewing project specifications when my phone rang with a call from someone I'd been hoping to hear from. "Colby, this is Amanda Rodriguez from TechCrunch. I'm working on a story about reputation management in the digital age, and your situation has come to my attention as a case study in how false allegations can backfire when the target is prepared." "I'm not sure I'm comfortable being a case study." "I understand your hesitation. But here's the thing. Your ex-fiancée has been shopping her story to several media outlets, claiming she's the victim of a sophisticated harassment campaign. She's provided what she claims is evidence of your misconduct." My stomach dropped. "What kind of evidence?" "Fabricated screenshots, edited audio files, and testimonials from people who, when we contacted them, had never heard of either of you. It's amateur hour stuff, but she's persistent. The problem is, some outlets might run with her story without doing proper fact-checking. So you're giving me a chance to respond." "I'm giving you a chance to provide the real evidence before someone else publishes the fake version. Because frankly, your documentation is far more compelling than her fabrications." I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with Amanda, walking through the timeline of events and providing supporting documentation for every claim. She was thorough, professional, and clearly experienced in separating truth from fiction. "This is going to be a fascinating article," she said when we finished. "Your ex-fiancée has essentially created a masterclass in how not to manage a personal crisis. Every move she's made has backfired spectacularly." "When will it be published?" "Next week. I'll send you a draft for fact-checking before it goes live." That afternoon, Mira's harassment campaign reached a new level of desperation. She'd created fake social media accounts to post negative reviews of my business, filed complaints with professional organizations I didn't belong to, and somehow gotten my phone number added to several spam call lists. But the most revealing incident came when she tried to sabotage my relationship with Dataflow Industries by impersonating a government regulator. Janet Morrison called me in a state of confusion. "Colby, I just got the strangest call from someone claiming to be from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. They said there was an ongoing investigation into your business practices and that we should suspend our contract pending resolution." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd need to see official documentation before taking any action, but when I asked for their badge number and a callback number, they hung up. It was Mira. She's been impersonating officials to try to damage my business relationships." That's actually illegal, isn't it?" "Very illegal. Janet, can you document exactly what was said in that call?" "Already done. I recorded it. Company policy for any calls involving legal matters." I forwarded Janet's recording to Pete, who was practically gleeful when he heard it. Impersonating a government official is a federal crime, he explained. This isn't just harassment anymore, this is felony territory. I'm contacting the FBI's cybercrime division immediately. But before Pete could file his report, Mira made one final catastrophic mistake. She showed up at my office. I was working late on the data flow project when I heard shouting in the lobby. Through my office window, I could see Mira arguing with the building's security guard, demanding to be led upstairs to confront the man who's been stalking her. I called 911 first, then grabbed my phone to record whatever was about to happen. By the time I reached the lobby, Mira had escalated to screaming about harassment, stolen money, and conspiracy. The security guard looked relieved to see me. "Sir, this woman claims you've been stalking her, but she's the one who came here uninvited and is refusing to leave." "Officer Williams," I said, reading his name tag. "This is my ex-fiancée. She's been conducting a harassment campaign against me for the past month, including filing false complaints and impersonating government officials." Mira spun around, her face flushed with rage. "Harassment? You've destroyed my life. You've turned everyone against me, cost me clients, ruined my reputation. I've told people the truth about what you did. If that destroyed your life, maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to destroy mine." The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers who took statements from everyone present and reviewed the security footage of Mira's arrival. Her story kept changing as they questioned her, and when they asked for identification, she couldn't provide a consistent address. "Ma'am," one of the officers said patiently, "you're going to need to leave this property immediately. If you return without permission, you'll be arrested for trespassing." "This isn't over," Mira hissed as they escorted her toward the exit. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I held up my phone, still recording. "Please, keep talking. The FBI is going to love this." She went very still. "The FBI? Impersonating federal officials is a serious crime, Mira. So is filing false police reports, fraudulent complaints with government agencies, and harassment. You've been busy." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not anger, not calculation, not wounded pride, actual fear of consequences. The officers finished their report and left, taking Mira with them for a final warning about trespassing. I returned to my office and called Pete with an update. "That's it," he said. "We've got her on criminal charges now, plus enough civil violations to keep her in court for years. I'm filing everything tomorrow morning." What happens next? Next, she discovers that actions have consequences. And Colby, I think you're going to find that this nightmare is finally over. As I locked up the office and headed home, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. Mira had tried to destroy me and ended up destroying herself. Her reputation was in ruins, her business prospects were gone, and she was facing potential criminal charges. But more importantly, I'd learned something about myself. I wasn't the passive victim she'd thought I was. When pushed, I could push back, strategically, legally, and devastatingly effectively. The question now was whether Mira had finally learned her lesson, or if she had one more desperate gambit left to play. The FBI took Mira's case seriously. Agent Patricia Reeves, a specialist in cybercrime and identity fraud, called me 3 days after Pete filed our complaint. "Mr. Hale, we've reviewed your documentation, and I have to say, this is one of the most comprehensive harassment cases I've seen. Your ex-fiancée has violated at least 6 federal statutes and numerous state laws. What happens now?" "Now we build a case. But I should warn you, people like Ms. Castellano often escalate when they realize they're facing serious legal consequences. You should be prepared for her to make one final desperate attempt to turn this situation around." Agent Reeves was right to be concerned. The next morning, I woke up to find my car vandalized. Not with typical graffiti or damage, but with something far more creative and disturbing. Someone had covered my Honda with hundreds of photos, printouts of every social media post I'd made over the past 3 years, screenshots of text conversations with friends, even pictures of me taken without my knowledge at various locations around the city. The photos were held in place with industrial adhesive, creating a bizarre collage that would require professional removal. Attached to the windshield was a note. "Now everyone can see who you really are." I called the police immediately, then Pete, then Agent Reeves. Within an hour, my parking garage was crawling with investigators documenting what was clearly a calculated act of intimidation. "This required significant planning," Agent Reeves observed, photographing the car from multiple angles. "She would have needed access to your social media history, your location patterns, and considerable time to print and arrange all these materials. How did she get photos of me that I never posted online? That's what we're going to find out. This level of surveillance suggests she's been stalking you for much longer than we initially realized." While the investigators worked, I called Ty to give him an update. His response was immediate and predictable. "That's it. This woman has lost her mind completely. What do you want me to do?" "Nothing illegal," I said firmly. "But if you happen to know anyone who specializes in information gathering, now might be a good time to make some calls." Ty's network of contacts was more extensive than I'd realized. By afternoon, he'd assembled a dossier on Mara's activities over the past month that was frankly impressive in its thoroughness. "She's been living with her mother," he reported, "but that's about to end. Apparently the old lady is embarrassed by all the drama and wants her out. She's been borrowing money from anyone who'll lend it, including some people who aren't known for their patience with delinquent borrowers." "What about Arlen?" "Arlen's got his own problems. His startup is hemorrhaging money. His investors are bailing, and his social media presence has become toxic thanks to his association with your ex. Word is, he's been trying to distance himself from her, but she's not taking the hint. So she's desperate. Desperate and running out of options, which makes her dangerous." That evening, I was working late at my home office when my building's concierge called. "Mr. Hale, there's a woman here claiming to be your fiancée. She says she lost her key and needs to be led up to your apartment." "What does she look like?" "Auburn hair, very upset, carrying a large suitcase." "Do not let her up. Call the police immediately. This woman has been served with a restraining order and is not authorized to be in this building." "Understood, sir. Should I tell her anything?" "Tell her that her conversation is being recorded and that any threats or harassment will be forwarded to the FBI." 20 minutes later, the police called to inform me that Mara had been arrested for violating the restraining order. She'd apparently become increasingly agitated when denied access to the building, eventually threatening the concierge and attempting to force her way past the security desk. "She's in custody for the night," the officer explained, "but given her pattern of escalation, you might want to consider additional security measures." I spent the next day upgrading my personal security, new locks, security cameras, and a consultation with a private security firm about protective services. It felt surreal, taking precautions against someone I'd once planned to marry. But the most effective security measure came from an unexpected source. "Colby, it's Amanda Rodriguez from TechCrunch. My article about your situation is going live tomorrow morning, but I wanted to give you a heads up about something else." "What's that?" "I've been contacted by 3 other men who've had similar experiences with your ex-fiancée. Apparently this isn't her first time running a long-term deception and harassment campaign." My stomach dropped. "There were others?" "At least 3 that I've been able to verify. Similar patterns. She targets successful men, builds relationships based on financial benefit, then launches scorched earth campaigns when the relationships end. One of them is willing to go on the record." "What happened to him?" "She cost him his business and nearly drove him to bankruptcy before he managed to get a restraining order. But here's the interesting part. He's been tracking her activities ever since, documenting her patterns and warning potential victims." "He's been investigating her?" "For 2 years, and he's got evidence that could put her away for a very long time." That afternoon, I met David Chen, no relation to Marcus, at a coffee shop in Cambridge. He was a software engineer like me, about my age, with the kind of haunted look that comes from surviving a systematic campaign of psychological warfare. "She nearly destroyed me," he said without preamble. 3 years of my life, gone. My business, my reputation, my savings, all of it sacrificed to someone who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. How did you figure out what she was doing? The same way you did. I found evidence of her real intentions. But by then, she'd already moved most of our joint assets into accounts I couldn't access, and had started spreading rumors about my mental health to anyone who would listen. He showed me a thick folder of documentation, financial records, legal filings, screenshots of social media harassment, and most damning of all, evidence of similar campaigns against other men. "She has a type," David explained. "Successful, but somewhat isolated men, usually in tech or finance. She studies them for months before making contact, learning their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Then she builds relationships designed to maximize her access to their resources while minimizing her emotional investment." "How many others have there been?" "That I can prove? 4, including you and me. But I suspect there are more who were too embarrassed to come forward or too damaged to fight back." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I did, but she's very good at covering her tracks and presenting herself as the victim. It wasn't until I started connecting with other targets that I could establish a pattern of behavior." David's evidence was devastating. Phone records showing Mira had maintained relationships with multiple men simultaneously. Financial documents proving she'd systematically drained joint accounts. And most shocking of all, audio recordings of her bragging to friends about her projects. "She calls them projects," David explained. "Each relationship is a project with specific financial goals and timelines. You were Project Boston, her attempt to establish herself in the city's tech scene. And when I discovered her plan, she switched to Project Destruction. If she couldn't profit from you, she'd destroy you as punishment and as a warning to anyone else who might cross her." That evening, I called Agent Reeves with David's information. Her response was immediate and intense. "Mr. Hale, what you're describing sounds like a sophisticated fraud operation. If we can prove she's been running similar schemes against multiple victims, we're talking about federal racketeering charges. What do you need from me?" "Everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence you and Mr. Chen have collected. We're opening a full investigation immediately." The next morning, Amanda's article went live on TechCrunch. The headline read, "When Revenge Backfires, a Case Study in Digital Age Harassment." The piece was thorough, well-researched, and devastating in its analysis of Mira's campaign against me. But more importantly, it included quotes from David and references to the broader pattern of behavior we'd uncovered. Within hours, the article had been shared thousands of times and picked up by other media outlets. My phone started ringing immediately. Other potential victims, journalists requesting interviews, and law enforcement agencies from multiple states where Mira had operated. "You've opened a floodgate," Pete observed when I updated him on the situation. "This woman has been running cons for years, and now everyone's coming forward at once. Is that good or bad for our case?" "It's excellent. Individual harassment cases can be hard to prosecute, but systematic fraud across multiple jurisdictions, that's a career-making case for any prosecutor." The most satisfying call came from Janet Morrison at Dataflow Industries. "Colby, I just read the TechCrunch article. I had no idea what you were dealing with. How are you holding up?" "Better now that the truth is out there." "Well, I've got some good news that might help even more. Our board met this morning and voted to expand your contract significantly. We're also recommending you to 3 other companies in our network." "That's incredibly generous." "It's good business. You've handled an impossible situation with professionalism and integrity. Those are exactly the qualities we want in our partners." By the end of the week, the FBI had arrested Mira on multiple federal charges. The evidence David and I had provided, combined with testimony from other victims, painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning several years and multiple states. Agent Reeves called with the update. She's being held without bail pending trial. The prosecutor is confident we can get convictions on the major charges, which carry significant prison time. What about the harassment campaign against me? That's the least of her problems now. But for what it's worth, I think your ordeal is finally over. That evening, I sat in my apartment, my secure, peaceful apartment, and reflected on everything that had happened. 3 months ago, I'd been engaged to someone I thought I loved, planning a future that was built on lies and manipulation. Now I was free, financially secure, professionally successful, and surrounded by people who'd proven their loyalty when it mattered most. My phone buzzed with a text from Ty. Drinks to celebrate? I'm buying. What are we celebrating? I texted back. Justice, freedom, and the fact that you're a lot tougher than anyone gave you credit for. I smiled and grabbed my keys. He was right about that last part. I'd learned something important about myself through this ordeal. I wasn't the passive victim Mara had thought I was. When pushed, I could push back strategically, legally, and devastatingly effectively. More importantly, I'd learned that the truth, properly documented and strategically revealed, was the most powerful weapon of all. As I headed out to meet Ty, I thought about Mira sitting in her jail cell, finally facing the consequences of her actions. She'd tried to destroy me and ended up destroying herself instead. It was, I reflected, exactly what she deserved. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the Tech Boston Innovation Summit, looking out at an audience of 500 entrepreneurs, investors, and industry leaders. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same community where Mira had tried to destroy my reputation, now listening to me deliver the keynote address on crisis management and professional resilience. The first thing you need to understand about reputation attacks, I began, is that the truth is your best defense, but only if you're prepared to use it strategically. The speech went well. Afterward, during the networking reception, I was approached by dozens of people, potential clients, collaborators, and surprisingly, other victims of similar schemes who'd found the courage to come forward after reading about my case. Your story gave me the strength to fight back, said Maria Santos, a marketing consultant from Miami. My ex tried the same playbook, financial manipulation, reputation attacks, the works. But seeing how you documented everything and turned it against her, it showed me I wasn't powerless. These conversations were becoming common. The TechCrunch article had sparked a broader discussion about relationship fraud and harassment, leading to new legislation in several states and increased awareness among law enforcement. But the most satisfying moment came when I spotted a familiar face in the crowd, David Chen, now running a successful cybersecurity firm and serving as an expert witness in fraud cases across the country. "How's the new business?" I asked as we shook hands. "Booming. Turns out there's a lot of demand for someone who understands how these predators operate." He grinned. "Speaking of which, I've got some news you'll appreciate." "Good news or bad news?" "Depends on your perspective. Mara's trial starts next month. The prosecutor thinks they've got her cold on the federal charges: wire fraud, identity theft, racketeering. She's looking at 15 to 20 years. I felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction, relief, and surprisingly, a small measure of pity. Mira had destroyed so many lives, including ultimately her own. "Any word on plea negotiations?" "Her lawyer's been trying, but the prosecutor isn't interested. Too many victims, too much evidence, too much media attention. They want to make an example of her." As the evening wound down, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a moderately successful consultant, engaged to someone I thought I loved. Now, I was running a thriving business, speaking at major industry events and helping other people navigate similar crises. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been dark moments, nights when I questioned everything, days when the harassment felt overwhelming. times when I wondered if fighting back was worth the cost. But ultimately, Mira had done me a favor. Her betrayal had forced me to become stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I'd ever imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Ty. "Saw your speech on the live stream. You absolutely nailed it. Drinks later?" "Absolutely," I replied. "I've got news." The news was Dataflow Industries' offer to acquire my consulting firm for a sum that would set me up for life. The acquisition was partly about my technical skills, but mostly about my reputation for handling crisis situations with integrity and strategic thinking. "You're going to take it?" Ty asked over beers at our usual spot. "I'm considering it. The money's good, and I'd have resources to help more people in situations like mine." "Sounds like you've already decided." I took a sip of my beer and looked around the bar. It was the same place where we'd planned my counterattack against Mira's harassment campaign, where we'd celebrated small victories and planned the next moves in what had felt like an endless war. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said. "I'm actually grateful to her." Ty nearly choked on his drink. "Grateful? The woman tried to destroy your life." "She tried, but she failed, and in failing, she showed me what I was really capable of. Before all this, I was just drifting, successful enough, comfortable enough, but not really pushing myself or taking risks. And now? Now I know I can handle whatever life throws at me. I can fight back, I can win, and I can help others do the same." My phone rang. Agent Reeves with an update on the case. "Colby, I wanted to let you know that Mira's legal team reached out about a plea deal. They're offering to plead guilty to the federal charges in exchange for a recommendation of 10 years instead of 20. "What did the prosecutor say?" "They're considering it, but they want input from the victims first. What's your position?" I thought about it for a moment. 10 years would still be a significant punishment, and it would spare everyone the ordeal of a lengthy trial. "I think justice would be served either way," I said finally. "But I want her to understand that actions have consequences. If she pleads guilty, she needs to make full restitution to all her victims and publicly acknowledge what she did." "I'll pass that along." "And Colby? For what it's worth, you've handled this entire situation with remarkable grace. A lot of people in your position would have wanted revenge." "I got my revenge," I replied. "I got my life back." After I hung up, Ty raised his beer in a toast. "To getting your life back." "To getting a better life back," I corrected. We drank to that and to the strange turns that life can take when you're brave enough to fight for what you deserve. 3 weeks later, I was cleaning out my office in preparation for the Dataflow acquisition when I found something I'd forgotten about. The original engagement ring receipt, tucked away in a folder of old documents. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering the man who'd bought that ring. He'd been so sure of his future, so confident in his choices, so naive about the person he'd chosen to love. That man was gone now, replaced by someone harder, wiser, and infinitely more capable of protecting himself and others. I shredded the receipt and threw it away. Some chapters of life deserve to be closed permanently. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your success. You deserve everything good that's happened to you." It was signed MC, Mira's initials. I stared at the message for several minutes, wondering if it was genuine or another manipulation. In the end, I decided it didn't matter. I blocked the number and deleted the message without responding. Some people don't deserve the energy it takes to hate them. That evening, I had dinner with my mother, who'd been following the entire saga with the mixture of pride and concern that only mothers can manage. "So what's next?" she asked over dessert. "Dataflow wants me to head up their new crisis management division, help other companies and individuals deal with reputation attacks, harassment campaigns, that sort of thing." "Sounds perfect for you." "I think so too. I've learned that I'm good at this, at fighting back strategically, at turning someone's weapons against them, at helping people find their strength when they think they've lost everything. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Colby. Not just for how you handled this situation, but for who you've become because of it. Who have I become? Someone who doesn't let other people define his worth. Someone who fights for what's right. Someone who turns his pain into purpose. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, my secure, peaceful, successful apartment, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, Mayra had stood in my kitchen with her friends, laughing at my supposed weakness, telling me to go ahead and leave because I'd never find anyone better. She'd been wrong about almost everything, but she'd been right about one thing. I had left. I'd left behind the version of myself that accepted disrespect, that tolerated manipulation, that settled for less than I deserved. The man who'd replaced him was stronger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who tried to take advantage of him. My phone rang. A potential client who'd heard about my work and needed help with their own harassment situation. Mr. Hale, I hope you don't mind me calling so late. I'm dealing with something similar to what you went through, and I don't know where else to turn. I grabbed a pen and paper, ready to help another person find their strength and fight back against someone who'd underestimated them. Tell me everything, I said, and don't worry, we're going to fix this. Because that's what I did now. I helped people fight back. I helped them win. And I was very, very good at it. The transformation of Colby Hale was complete. The unmaking of Mayra Castellano had become the making of something far more powerful, a man who understood that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down when someone tries to destroy you. In the end, she'd been right about one thing. I had realized what I'd lost. I'd lost my naivety, my willingness to be used, and my tolerance for people who mistake kindness for weakness. And I'd never been happier to lose anything in my life.